Welcome to the Buffalo Sports Conversation Room. I'm your host, Jamie Malloy, and we are finishing up week 2 of the NFL season and ready to talk about it. So now let's bring on my co-host, the New York Mets fan, and also my fellow Buffalo Bills buddy here. Please welcome everybody once again, Mr. Joe Dalio. Let's bring him on. Hi, Joe. How you doing?
I am doing excellent, Jamie. How you doing?
I'm doing great as always. I think we had a nice uh, pre-talk show, pep talk behind the stage. We were talking about all things from the Bills to Matt Milano to Mets baseball and everything. But this is a football podcast, so and I was talking about the comment that we we got. So yeah, are you ready to talk about week 2 of the NFL recap, starting with the Thursday night game, Minnesota at Philadelphia?
I am always ready to do that. This is has become the highlight, one of the highlights of my football week here. So I am always ready to discuss that. So yes.
Okay, so let's begin. So basically this was a game where the Minnesota Vikings were coming off a tough home loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in which nobody expected Tampa to probably win that game. And week 2 was another tough one for them, especially because, like I said, the week 1 game was a close loss. This week, they had to travel to Lincoln Financial Field to take on Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, who won a close game, 25-20 against New England, even though it looked like it was going to be runaway city in the first quarter, the second quarter, when Philly was up 16-0. But credit the Patriots for making a comeback and Coach Belichick making adjustments as he's always been doing in his career. But yeah, so basically, I thought that this was a good game. I mean, Minnesota, I thought went no huddle. I thought that was pretty cool to watch them do that against Philly. And even though they lost the game, I think Minnesota's learning that they don't really need Dalvin Cook anymore. Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. But I think they're finding out that Jordan Addison's going to be a stud wide receiver in the NFL for a long time. As the first round rookie, looked really, really good. And he should be, because he was another wide receiver that came from USC. And as you know, the past 7 years in the past decade to now, how good USC receivers have done going into the pros. So yeah, what did you think about the Eagles? Once again, barely squeaking out this game like they did against New England week 1.
Yeah, I felt it was pretty similar to that game. You know, the Eagles had this game pretty easily. You know, just like they started against the Patriots. I thought they were going to blow the Patriots out. So did everybody else, and they just barely held on. You know, to win that game. And it was pretty much the same here. I thought, you know, kudos to the Eagles for winning the game and doing what they had to do to get the win. You know, I always say that in the NFL, a win is a win, and they did get the win. But it was very similar to the New England game, where I thought, you know, the Eagles, I don't think we've seen the best of that team yet, you know, from Jalen Hurts, you know, on down. I mean, minus, you know, Devontae Smith, who had an amazing game. But, you know, again, I don't think we saw the highest potential of this Eagles team at this point. I think they were a little sloppy. You know, I think, you know, they lack some of the urgency. And, you know, in some senses, just like with New England, they were lucky to hold on to the win, you know, but, you know, again, a win's a win in the NFL. And here they are, you know, not maybe playing their best football, but, you know, being a 2-0, you know, and then, you know, on the other side, you know, with the Vikings, you know, in their first game, I didn't see much urgency. And for the first 3 quarters of this game, I didn't see much urgency from them. You know, a couple of good plays here and there, but I didn't think they were playing at their potential either. You know, and then they you know, stormed towards the end and almost stole the game. You know, and you know, like they did a few times last year. So, you know, the bottom line is the Eagles got the win. The Vikings are in a little bit of trouble at 0-2. But, you know, I think we're going to see better play going forward. for both of these teams. Now, that's what I saw, and I'm curious, as to what your thoughts are on this game too, because uh, I don't think we saw the best of either of these teams.
Yeah, I think I still think Minnesota isn't playing to their potential, but I also want to say I think it's going to be interesting because they're an 0-2 team, but I think they're a team that is going to improve as the season goes
Hmm.
on. Like they're obviously, I don't see them going 13-3 like last year, but I
Hmm.
still think they're good enough to be a 10-7, 11-6 team, even without Delvin Cook. And if you're Minnesota at this point, I think you take that, especially after starting out 0-2, because Jordan Addison, as I mentioned, is a very good receiver. You got Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins, but they just got to, like I said, there's still a work in progress with a new
Hmm.
running back. But I think that's going to all start to gel as the season go on. So what do you think? Could Minnesota start gelling as the season goes on?
I expect them to. I picked them to win that division, and it's still wide open. There's no dominant team in that division. A lot of people are high on the Lions, and like I said, they'll be tough. But I still I picked the Vikings to win the division originally. I haven't watched a potential division winning team at this point, but I certainly think that potential is out there, and they still have a chance to do it, even being at 0-2.
We're gonna get into that later about the 0-2 teams, but I
Hmm.
do agree with that. Okay, so now that the Bills came out looking like their old selves again, and it was a very um, business-like performance against the Raiders, 38-10. I noticed that the Bills' offense, that was the clean. I think that's probably one of the more cleaner and crisp games the offense has looked under Dorsey. And Josh Allen was being smart. He was taking what the defense was giving him, and he learned from last week to just run the offense normal and
Hmm.
don't try to force balls and throw interceptions. And he looked like a completely different quarterback, and he was very poised and under control and everything. So and I think that's going to be the recipe going forward with that, being able to you know, win games with just a an offense that's more about execution and being careful rather than being uh crazy wazy a little bit. So
Hmm.
and Allen having to be like Superman. So what were your thoughts about the whole team's effort? Because I also want to say it was a team win as well. The whole team played well too.
Yeah, there's in all aspects. I mean, they played. This is the Bills team that everybody expected. This is the Josh Allen that everyone expected. This is the Bills offense that everybody expected. I couldn't believe at times I was watching the same football team as 6 days before. They just, like you said, business as usual. They came out and played to their potential. And I was reading before, Josh Allen's quarterback rating was almost double than what it was in game one. I think he had a 67% quarterback rating in the first game against the Jets, and he was at 100. He was at 124 in this one. And I heard it's funny because somebody was saying this. I forget who it was. Somebody on XM radio, and they were talking about Josh Allen, and they said, "Look, they got to tell this guy you don't always have to wear the Superman cape. You could just go out there and play like you know how. There may be times where we need you to put the cape on and do something crazy and super. But in a game like this in week two at home against an inferior team, just go out and do what you know how to do and win the game, as methodically as you can." And, he showed absolutely no effects of week one. I saw no discouragement. He just shook it off like you would expect somebody like that to do. He just shook it off, forgot that it ever happened. That's what it seemed like, and just went out there and played to his talent level and brought everybody up with him. And you had solid performances, by Stephon Diggs, by Gabe Davis. The tight ends again contributed. excellent job on the running game. I mean, when is the last time that the Bills ran the ball 30 times? I can't remember, and with James Cook over 100 yards and the other guys making solid contributions, I think they had like 30 rush attempts, which is unheard of for this Bills offense. So I am all in favor of that. I looked at the defensive stats just to see, hey, who dominated, who stood out here. And if you look, I think the leading tackler had 4 tackles, but there were about 5 or 6 guys that had 4 tackles, so everybody contributed, everybody did their part. And, you wish it was always this easy, and as far as the offense is concerned, I mean, you got to pay attention to who the defenses are. I mean, I think the Jets are an above average defense, and they're going to cause many teams to struggle, whereas the Raiders are probably not. So they had a much easier time against this defense. And I think they might have even seen it as a breath of fresh air, compared to the Jets defense. But again, in all aspects of the game, they played like the better team. They didn't try to do anything superior, out of the ordinary, and, still won the game handily. So, again, I don't know if you noticed the same thing, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this too.
I did notice the same thing. It was just a very efficient offense. The defense played great as a team this second week in a row. Greg Russo got a sack. I was very happy about that.
Yep.
Terrell Bernard, a 43-yard interception. He may be small, but he's very quick for a linebacker. So, yeah, Matt Milano had an interception where he jumped in the air.
We're going to have to change his last name to Lott or something. Where's he coming up with all these interceptions? That's 2 in a row.
That is 2 in a row. And I also think this offense, the sky's the limit and everything. But I also think, I don't know if you noticed this. Remember, we've been talking about the Deebo Samuel effect taking place, and you're going to see it more. It looks like the Bills did it again where they had Hardy in the backfield. But did you notice they put Stephon Diggs in the backfield this week, and they tried to use him like a Deebo Samuel, and it was working because they were able to run those screen plays to him like a traditional running back, but he was able to cross the line of scrimmage and get a first down by putting him in the backfield. So, yeah, the Bills are still trying that Deebo Samuel effect. Heck, even the Browns were doing it last night when Nick Chubb got hurt. They put Elijah Mitchell in the backfield, and they also put their tight end in the backfield. And you said it's only going to keep growing. Like, do you still think there's other teams who haven't done it yet that might try it?
Yeah, I honestly don't know who has tried it and who hasn't. I did notice the Bills doing it. I did not notice the Browns doing it. I watched a little of that game. I did not see that. But, I think, this is a trend league. So when something works for somebody, I think you're only going to see more and more teams trying this and, adding this dimension to their offense. So I honestly don't have a record of who I've seen do this and who I haven't, but I'd be willing to bet you're going to see more and more teams take this approach.
Yeah, exactly. Because, the Falcons do it with Cordell Patterson all the time, and the 49ers do it with Deebo Samuel, and the Cowboys are doing it with Kevontae Turpin too. So,
right.
Yeah. And what's actually really cool about it actually opens up your play calling a little bit. You could potentially run some cool pass plays with it, and you can even do some jet sweeps or some flea flickers or double reverse passes with that too. So it could eventually lead up to that moment too. But moving on, do you think can the Bills offense duplicate its success against the Commanders defense next week with Ron Rivera? Because here's what's interesting. As we all know, Sean McDermott was Ron Rivera's defensive coordinator in Carolina. So I wonder if they're going to have to maybe change their defensive scheme up, because I think Rivera is probably going to know some of his tendencies. I'd like to get your thoughts on how do you think the Bills will approach the game defensively and offensively against him. Do you keep doing what you're doing because it's working, or do you try to change it because Rivera could end up watching film and knowing what Sean McDermott does? He probably does some of the same stuff with the Commanders.
That's a very good question. I would expect that the Bills continue to do what's working, although I do think Coach is definitely smart enough to realize that Rivera is going to know some of these plays as they work together. So I think he is going to make some changes. I think in general they stick to what's been working. But again, I think he's smart enough to know that he's going to have to make some adjustments and come up with some surprises just because they are going to be watching film and again, he's got that background knowledge that would make things a little difficult. But I mean, I don't know about you, and I'm curious to hear your opinion about this in a second. I think this is a game where if the Bills do continue to do what worked effectively, it should put them in the win column again.
I agree with that. I right now just stay the course until other coaches figure it out. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going until they can stop it, and then you make the adjustments. But yes, it's going to be interesting going up against a rookie quarterback in Sam Howell, and the Commanders are 2-0, but they obviously they've only won close games against two teams that don't really look that impressive. And the Bills, I think, if they take care of business there, then it's moving on to Miami, where a lot of people are saying Miami could have the best offense in NFL history. But people got to remember the Bills got a pretty good defense, and Miami hasn't faced a defense like the Bills yet. So it should be interesting how McDermott is going to call the plays on defense against a Miami offense where you watch Tua. He gets rid of the ball. He's getting rid of the ball faster than he's ever had in his first 2 years in the league. So
yeah, it's funny. I wanted to put a shout out there. We got a comment earlier from Tom in Tallahassee that we very much appreciate. And just so you know, Tom, we're rooting for your Seminoles this weekend against Clemson. So we'll be watching that. But if we want to look ahead to that Miami game, Miami's offense has been playing great. I think it's a little premature to call them, possibly the best ever. But the way the Bills defense is playing, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. But, and of course, we got to get past this game first here in Washington. But I'm not that fearful of the Bills' ability to stop that Miami offense. Being, again, a familiar divisional opponent, I think, you got some background knowledge there. And again, focus on this game first and let's win it. And I'm sure we'll be talking about, the Dolphins next week. But I'm not too fearful of that at this point yet. To be honest with you. And again, I think Washington is what I call a fake 2-0. I mean, again, a win's a win. I keep saying that, but I'm not really sold on Washington's football team because, again, inferior opponents. And again, you got those wins, but I think, the Bills are the superior team in this case. And if they play like it, it should not be much of an issue for them winning this game.
Agreed. Now, moving on to the New York Jets taking on the Dallas Cowboys. That's right. The Cowboys defense, who has looked amazing the first 2 weeks. Everybody kind of like the Dolphins. Everybody's talking about the Cowboys having probably one of the greatest defenses in the league. And Pat McAfee on SportsCenter was saying if the Super Bowl were to happen Wednesday, he thinks it would be the Dolphins and the Cowboys. But anyway, the Cowboys defense was red hot with Micah Parsons, who is probably already up for Defensive Player of the Year after 2 games, leading the squad. What did you think about that game and the Cowboys just completely obliterating the Jets on offense? Even though Zach Wilson didn't play that great, he did look a little more improved than he did last year when he got benched. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, the Jets played such an amazing game defensively against the Bills, but Dallas made them look like, you know, a second-rate defense. They just manhandled them there. Dallas's defense, I mean, what can you say? I think you pretty much said it. I mean, very, very impressive Super Bowl caliber defense that they played not only in this game against the Jets, but, their first game as well. And I mean, if this keeps up, that's going to take a lot of the pressure off the offense and Dak Prescott too. Look out for them if they're going to continue to play this way, especially on defense. And I mean, is that something you see continuing with them?
I do, especially with the fact the Cowboys run their own version of the West Coast offense, which they call the Texas Coast offense, where they just give Dak Prescott easy, short completions and just run the offense effectively. Don't try to force the ball deeper and interception and run the ball with Pollard and Rigo Dowell and just score on offense a bunch of points they can. And they've done that the first 2 weeks. And the defense is great. Dan Quinn, I mean, he's part of the reason why the Seahawks won Super Bowl 48, the Legion of Boom. He built that, and now he's building his own one in Dallas. I think he's probably going to go down as a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator someday, Dan Quinn. But I do see it continuing. And one great thing about them when they were able to dump Zeke's contract last year is now they're able to play running back by committee. So you put Tony Pollard in for one play, have him get the first downs a little bit, then you rotate Rico Dowdle in and just keep guys fresh. You keep your running backs fresh by committee so nobody gets hurt. And same thing with the defense. You rotate your defensive guys in so they're fresh as well. And that's another new trend you see around the league too with a lot of teams. The Bills do it too. So
right. And I was going to say too that this high level defense for Dallas is nothing new, with Dan Quinn. This has been several seasons now where they've had high quality defenses. I mean, I think they're playing at an even higher level now, but so in a way I'm not surprised, but it's going to be very interesting to see how well they can keep this level up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do against Philly with that defense too. If they can just make life miserable for Jalen Hurts, or they make some adjustments to how Jalen Hurts plays. So we'll see. So now let's focus on Sunday night's game with Miami at New England. This was a game where it looked like Miami was going to pull away, but give New England's defense credit for holding their own and holding them to 24 points at home. But unfortunately, the offense just couldn't put an equal effort together. And sadly, they were stopped at the end of the game on 4th and 1 when it was originally a first down call on that lateral play. And then the refs overturned it. But I think New England's a team that they're 0-2, but they're the opposite of the Chargers because the Chargers have an offense, but really no defense. The Patriots have a decent defense, but a not so great offense. So it's the opposite with them. Do you think, Joe, that they can bounce back next week after losing another close and tough game to Miami this week? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, I'm impressed with the way the Patriots are playing. I mean, they're 0-2, losing 2 home games, but look who they lost to. The Eagles, a Super Bowl contender, the Dolphins, a Super Bowl contender. They had chances to win against both of these teams. Against Philadelphia, almost blew them out, and they not only held on and stayed in the game, but had a chance to win it. And as you said, the Dolphins had a chance to pull away in this game too, and the Patriots wouldn't allow that, and they kept themselves in the game and gave them a chance. So, it's going to be a tough season for them. And again, I said, look, I really think still the Patriots can win, 7, 8, maybe even 9 games. It's going to be tough, again, but with a defense like they have, which I think is above average, that's going to keep them in games like this and give them chances to win on a regular basis. And I just got to hope that the offense, can put together, successful improvement here and maybe pull out some wins. But, again, give them credit with the way they played. I mean, Miami played an amazing game too. I feel like the Eagles played a little sloppy in week 1, whereas I think the Dolphins played a more consistent, solid game here to get the win in this game. But I appreciate the fight of the Patriots, and I think they're going to be like that all season long. And what do you think their chances are of being successful the rest of the season here?
I would say 7, 8, or 9 wins. I mean, they got a playoff caliber defense, but they just got to get the offense on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I wanted to say something. Melissa came back and she's listening to our podcast right now. She just commented. She said, "Hiya, Joe. I'm back." So it is the Melissa that you knew.
Yes, it is. Welcome back. I didn't see the comment. I'm glad you said something. And
she also just added, sorry, may not be able to stay. Things are rough with my fam health issues, but I had to show my love for the real New York team and you, Joe. And
well, very much appreciated. Thank you very much. That means a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. That's really nice of you to do that. And come on and listen to this for as long as you can. And if you want to lead, we're saying you could do that. Take care of your family, personal stuff and everything, because that's obviously important and everything. But thank you for coming back on and commenting. That's nice.
And we do wish you the best.
Let's see where we were. Oh yeah, Miami, New England. What do you think? Miami now 2-0. A great offense, but a defense that's kind of inconsistent. Where do you think they can go for week 3?
Who are the Dolphins playing week 3? Do you know? I didn't look.
I can look it up.
Okay. I mean, regardless of who it is, I mean, I think this can certainly continue, although I see the Dolphins being a little fragile, and that starts at the quarterback position. And we all know, how fragile, Tua is there, and how long could he keep going? He's one hit away from being out again, and how long will that continue? And if he does, have to miss some time, do they have capable backups to be able to keep the momentum going? Right now, the way things are going, I mean, it seems like they can beat anybody, and if they keep doing what they're doing, they certainly can.
They absolutely can. And, but I just saw who they're playing. They got a home game against Denver, in Miami afternoon, 1:00. So the sun's going to be, pointing on Denver, all, game long, because we experienced that last year in week 3 when we went down there, and look what happened there. So yeah, and in terms of my opinion, I think Miami can beat anyone, but they also did show fragility, and they do look fragile, or as the Christmas Carol would say, they look fragile, even though it's fragile. But
yes.
But yeah, so the Dolphins, they're only going to be able to go where Tua's going to take them to go. And so anyway, let's talk about Monday night. And it was hard to choose which game I did, but obviously I went with the ABC game of the night, or possibly one of the craziest finishes of the night, with the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I thought this was a wild game. I mean, in the second half, both defenses were just shutting the offenses down when it looked like they had momentum. But the key point of that game was the Alex Highsmith coming off the edge of the blitz and sacking Watson, and TJ Watt picking it up for the game-winning touchdown. And I thought that was crazy. So, Joe, what were your thoughts of that key fumble, and how do you think that was able to lead to the win? And I also want to ask you, is this another typical Cleveland loss, or do you think that was just a great call by Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator, in that situation and go with the blitz there and have TJ Watt scoop and score for the touchdown.
Yeah, I guess to answer that question first, I think it's more of a good defensive call there. I mean, we know Cleveland's not the luckiest team out there, and they've had a lot of tough losses. But I think that's definitely more of a testament to great defensive play calling. Now, I'm going to admit I was in La La Land long before, we got to that point of the game. I did read about this. I watched part of the game. I saw the unfortunate part, where Nick Chubb went down. But, and that's, I'll talk about how that's going to affect the Browns in a second. But, you know, any game between Pittsburgh and Cleveland is going to be crazy, and just to read about some of the crazy things that happened in this game and the great defensive calls and, some clutch plays. That's why we watch these games. And again, I tried to watch it, but, just too tired and crashed way before. But, I'm a little concerned for Cleveland now, obviously with Nick Chubb going down. I thought, you know what, maybe they could be an unexpected contender. But to lose a tough game like this and then to lose, arguably one of your best players, that's a task that I think is going to be a little too difficult for them in a very difficult division. So it's sad that I think a lot of the hope for Browns fans is lost. But if they're going to come out and play games like this, then who knows? Maybe all is not lost. And I've heard some rumors about potential running back replacements there. But, you hate to see great players get hurt. Aaron Rodgers, Nick Chubb, anybody. But that's why football is so exciting to have, fabulous finishes like this. Now, did you actually get to watch the game and see it live or?
I did. And I want to say, I think Pittsburgh knew going in that this isn't the same old bad Browns teams that they're used to beating up on. They know that this is probably the most talented Browns team that they've had, and that they got a chance to actually compete. And finally, they're taking the franchise in a direction that they haven't been, and it's a positive direction no matter what they finish this year and everything. And I do think it does stink that they lose Nick Chubb. He's a great running back and everything, but I do like Jerome Ford. I think he did show that he could take over as the starting running back, and I have him on fantasy too, and he's a very fast, explosive back too. So, and this, like I said, this gives them a better chance of being able to use the Deebo Samuel effect now with Elijah Mitchell and tight ends in the backfield. So maybe that'll help them use that more going forward, which could help the offense. And Deshaun Watson, you could say I think what he did last night was ridiculous. The two face masks when you stiff arm somebody, that should never be. A quarterback should let me play both sides of the aisle of this. You should never have to call a face mask penalty on a quarterback. But when a quarterback's running, a quarterback's got to know that you should never grab the face mask of a defensive player. So there you go. That was my fair and balanced take there on that. What do you think? What did you think of that embarrassing display by Watson? Do you think he should have gotten thrown out for that? Some people think he should have gotten kicked out for those two penalties.
No, honestly, I mean, I don't think he should have been ejected, but maybe for stupidity. I mean, you just, like you said, you just don't do that. I mean, that goes back to Little League football. You don't do that, and it's sad because it took away, a chance to win. And, you're talking about your guy Ford there that I think he ended up with over 100 yards, if I'm not mistaken,
He did.
and, he's definitely in line for that. I heard, Kareem Hunt was in town, talking. He's a free agent and he's played like the last 4 years with the Browns. I think he might be a good pickup and you can use them both, and plus, like you said, the Deebo Samuel effect too. So, perhaps all is not lost with Chubb being gone, but I think that puts a real, a dent in their chances to go, to potentially make the playoffs.
Mhm. Yeah, see, when both Barkley and Nick Chubb got hurt, it kind of pushes the media conversation of, do you really need these superstar running backs when like Daniel Jones just got a $145 million contract as a quarterback, and Deshaun Watson is making $230 million a year. Plus, they gave up 3 first-round picks to get him too. And because the reason why I'm saying that is the running backs aren't getting paid, but now you notice it's the quarterbacks that even if they play average, they're getting paid all the money so that they can still be able to play and not have to worry about overspending for your skill positions or your other positions. So what do you think of that media conversation that isn't coming up? Do you think that conversation should come up though? Because I feel like I'm bringing it up on this platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've talked about it on several shows here, and we agreed basically that, the running back is a less significant position than it was. And running backs tend to be, unless you're in the top 3 superstars, dime a dozen positions. And whether you agree or not, I mean, that's kind of the way the league is going and that offenses are going. And the quarterback is a much more significant position. So I could see why they're the ones getting the big bucks, or even wide receivers. Even you could talk on a lower level as far as, you were talking about your fantasy football team there. Not too long ago, you look at all the potential draft lists and the top, all the expert picks as far as who to draft in your fantasy league. Everybody was running backs. You had to have running backs, and your first picks had to be running backs, and that's how you had to build your team around. And it was the same with NFL teams. Now, we're both in fantasy football leagues here. Who's at the top of the list? Everybody says build your team around the wide receivers and quarterbacks. In the past, fantasy football, you're crazy if you draft quarterbacks first round, you maybe in second round. Now you're almost crazy if you don't. So, that's a lower level example, but I think that's what not only fantasy general managers looking at, but that's how NFL general managers are treating things. And I think the running back position is less significant than it was even 5 years ago.
It's analytics. That's what it is. And that's that. And in my fantasy league, what I did was I did it exactly that way in terms of I waited until the 3rd or 4th round to take a running back. I went with the wide receiver and the quarterback and everything. And I'm 0-2 in my fantasy league so far, but I actually won the best manager award in terms of how I analytically approached my draft on when to take certain players in each round. I was thinking about it like a regular GM.
And that's a great way to handle it. And I think that's going to get you wins as we go forward. I think it'll even out for you. I'm 1-1 so far, but that's why I do a lot of daily fantasy, because it's all based on the draft. And, if you're a good drafter like that, your chances are good. So, but that's how the real GMs do it. It seems like, and that's the trend that the league is going as far as how GMs and organizations are building their teams. Get everything on this show, even fantasy football. How do you like that?
Oh, this is interesting. Melissa's got 2 comments. She said, so thoughts as Bills fans of maybe a potential Kirk Cousins to the Jets if the Vikings keep losing. Do you see that happening?
I don't. In fact, I think we were going to talk about the Jets' potential quarterback situation.
We are still going to do that.
I
No, I don't see that happening, Melissa, but that's a good
don't.
conversation to bring up with us. And she also said analytics is why the Chargers will never accomplish anything, because that's all Brandon Stanley cares about.
Right.
Good. That's what a coach should. That's what a coach should care about. I mean, you might be a Brandon Staley hater, but analytics are important in today's game. But yeah, I respect your opinion, Melissa. I get it. Brandon Staley's a polarizing figure right now, but he has to follow the trends like most coaches have to do now if he wants to get his team back to what he wanted out of the 0-2 hole, which we're going to talk about more 0-2 teams moving on. So now let's talk about actually, guess what? It's now that time to talk about the question of the week, Joe.
Uh-oh.
Your favorite segment of this week. Anyway,
Pressure.
so yep, here's your question, Joe. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, so tell us who this 2000s to 2010s NFL wide receiver was. Who number one was a seventh round draft pick, had 72 touchdowns, played on only one team, and played in Super Bowl 44. Is it Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, Wes Welker, or Marquise Colson?
Okay. Well, I can you name those again?
I can. It's Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, Wes Welker, Marquise Colson.
Okay. I think the first two guys you mentioned played on multiple teams, at least two teams. Amendola, it seems like he played for half the league, but Edelman, I think, played for more than one. Oh, shoot. I'm trying to think of, all right, Super Bowl 44 would have been in 2010. Oh, and I'm trying to think of if Welker played on one team. Name those last two one more time, please.
Actually, Welker played on two. We started with the Miami Dolphins, remember?
Okay.
And then he
Okay.
went to the Patriots.
And who was the last guy you mentioned?
Marquez Colston, and he played for the Saints.
Then I'm going to go with him.
You were right, because in Super Bowl 44, the New Orleans Saints played Peyton Manning's Indianapolis Colts, and Tracy Porter's pick six stalled a potential game-tying drive by the Colts at the end, and the Saints were able to win 31-17, and Marquez Colston played for the Saints in
That's
that
right.
Super Bowl. And it was Drew Brees' first Super Bowl for him and the city of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina when he got there and after leaving the Chargers. And there was a lot of controversy of could he do it there, and a lot of media speculation, everything. But yeah, you were correct. It's Marquise Colston. And Melissa, if you were on the show, you would have gotten it right too. So anyway, let's talk about a really tough question of the 8 teams through Sunday's games played that are 0-2. So how likely are some of these teams to make it to the Super Bowl? We begin with the Cincinnati Bengals. They lost 24-3 to the Browns week 1 and 27-24 Sunday to the Ravens. Now, they're a team that obviously last year started out 0-2, had offensive line problems, and then obviously made their way to the AFC Championship game where they lost to the Chiefs. But it looks like this year the same problems are happening just like last year, 0-2, and offensive line's not blocking for Burrow. Burrow doesn't have enough time to throw the ball. He's making poor decisions by throwing picks at the goal line and everything. And so what do you think? Is it panic mode there in Cincinnati now? Because the only difference is last year they were obviously the kings of that division, but this year the division's tougher. So do you think so, Joe? What do you think their chances are of making it to the Super Bowl? I say it's still slim, but it's going to be harder than last year when they were 0-2. What are your thoughts?
That's exactly what I say. I mean, I have not been able to figure this team out. I didn't have them going to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. After they were 0-2 last year, I thought they were done, and I thought maybe they're not even going to make the playoffs, and turned out to be a Super Bowl contender again. I'm saying the same thing this year. Now, at first, I was like, hey, they've been through this before. They were the last 0-2 team to make the playoffs here just a year ago, and there's no reason to say that they can't turn it around again. However, I think things are a little different this year. I think the offensive line is weaker than it was last year. I just read, that Joe Burrow just aggravated the calf injury that he had during the preseason, and we weren't sure if he was even going to play at this point of the season yet. So now we're not sure, if he's going to play, the next week or two. So based on the play of the offensive line and based on Burrow's health, those two things right there, I think there's some serious red flags as far, as for the Bengals going far or even making the playoffs. Again, they're in one of the tougher divisions, I think. Every team in the AFC North is competitive. And, look at what, Baltimore has done at this point. Pittsburgh is going to be there in the mix. Again, Cleveland is going to give teams trouble every time they play them. So, are the Bengals capable of making the playoffs? Definitely. But I think it's going to be a lot more challenging. And I think you just said this. It's going to be much more of a challenge this year than it was last year.
Yeah, and here's what I think. Speaking of the Ravens, you mentioned that you picked them to win the division in our
Yeah.
preseason prediction for the AFC North. And like you said, they're finally winning these close games at the end against two divisional opponents that they weren't able to the past 2 years, and the luck's starting to turn around with the Ravens, and who knows, if they win the division, they could be a tough outing at M&T Bank Stadium, but we'll see. So anyway, what about the Los Angeles Chargers? Do you think they have any chances? As we mentioned before, they got a great offense, but they have a very poor defense. And here's another stat. They've scored 54 points the first two games, haven't turned the ball over, and they're 0-2 because of their shoddy D. So what are your thoughts on that?
Right. That's a team that on the prediction shows that we had, I said they would have perhaps just barely good enough to get in the playoffs type season, but the type of team that could catch fire in the playoffs. Now, teams that don't turn the ball over usually do well. And I think that's going to give them a chance if they could play that kind of football going forward. I mean, it's not that they're going to be turnover free, but if they can limit those turnovers and the offense play like it has, that's certainly going to give them a chance. However, teams that give up points, like it's nothing and have inferior defenses don't go far in the playoffs. And if the Chargers defense continues to play like it is, then obviously I can't see them going far. But I'm going to stick to my prediction at this point. We're only 2 games in. In fact, out of all of the 0-2 teams, I think this is the one that I would say has the best chance still to make the playoffs. We'll talk about some of the other ones, in a minute here, but I still have a lot of faith in this team. I don't know. We were talking about Staley before. I don't know how far he goes. They lose another game or two. It's possible that change is made sooner than later.
Would possibly Kellen Moore, maybe. I think they would promote him to be the interim head coach.
They have guys in the wings. And again, if things continue to not go well and they lose these close games that they have chances to win, I don't see, and this is for years now going on. This is not just this season. So I don't know. I think his days are numbered unless they catch fire and unless there's major changes going on, with the defense. But I still have faith in them. And I still, again, playing turnover free or limited turnover. Like I said, they're not going to have no turnovers, but if they limit them, that always gives them a chance. And I don't know, am I the only crazy one, or do you think the Chargers have a chance too?
I do think the Chargers have a chance, but if they were able to fire Brandon Staley, I think Kellen Moore would be a great replacement. I mean, I think he could have actually probably been the replacement for the Cowboys if something were to happen to McCarthy. And I think he's ready to be a head coach. He's a great offensive coordinator, but I think he would do great with the Chargers as the interim coach. I think if they're going to go to the playoffs and make a run, I think it might be be through him and
I
not
agree.
Staley.
Good point.
Mhm. But speaking of which, guess what? Um, the Chargers, who are 0-2, have a chance to get their first win because we're moving on. They are playing the 0-2 Minnesota Vikings at home this year. So, what do you think of the Vikings situation? Because they're 0-2. They've come off some close losses. And like I said, remember, no more Dalvin Cook. Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. Addison looks like the real deal. And they're an 0-2 team that's playing against an 0-2 team that they're kind of similar to the Chargers. Great offense, but defense gave up too many points at the beginning of the game against Philadelphia. So your thoughts about Minnesota playing the Chargers in a battle of 0-2 teams this week?
Yeah, and I still have confidence in the Vikings too. I mean, I did pick them to win that division. I shouldn't keep admitting that because the chances seem less and less that it's going to happen. Because I actually think the Vikings will be 0-3 after this weekend. I think, as we were saying before, luck tends to even out. And we all know what happened with the Vikings last year and going 13-3 and getting so many last second, luck, not luck. I mean, it was skill too, but they did get a lot of fortunate situations and some, I don't want to call them lucky wins, but the ball bounced their way. Let's just put it that way. And that doesn't continue forever. And I think, their defense is questionable too. And I just think going to Los Angeles this weekend, you got two desperate teams playing. And I really think the Vikings are going to be 0-3. However, even after that, if that happens, don't count them out, because they still have the skill and the guys, I think, to, in a weak division to be there in the end. So, don't count them out yet, even though I believe firmly they're going to be 0-3. Do you agree?
I do agree. And I think they're actually, you know how last year they won all these great games and they didn't win a playoff game last year? I
Hmm.
could see them being in a situation where they're 0-3, then they go 9-8 or 10-7 and win the division, but actually win a
Right.
playoff game, even though they're not 14-3 like last year. They could be
Hmm.
11-6 or 10-7, win the division, but actually get past at least the wild card round and go to the divisional round and actually win a playoff game this year instead of having a better record and losing a playoff game last year. Agree with that?
Yeah, because if they win the division, they get the home game, and it's still not easy to beat them in Minnesota. So if they are able to get on track and win that division, which again they could win with 10 wins, let's say, even maybe 9 wins, again playing a home game in the playoffs, I could easily see them winning one.
Okay, I agree with that too. I think uh, that we just got to wait and see. This is a crazy league this year. The parity of the league, I don't think it's been better than, I think it's been better than ever, especially
Hmm.
this year and everything. Okay, let's talk about the 0-2 New England Patriots next. Now, this is the complete opposite of the Vikings and the Chargers. The Patriots have a good defense, but their offense has been lackluster and not opportunistic at key times. But they've lost 2 close games, one against the Eagles, who are the defending Super Bowl champs, and the Dolphins, who are already off to a hot start at 2-0. Do you think they have what it takes to at least get back to 8-9 wins or so? I know I already asked you this, but what are your
Hmm.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think, even before the season started, I did not see the Patriots as a playoff team, but I did see them as a competitive one. And even at 0-2, I see them the same way. In fact, I picked them to win against the Bills at the game in New England this year, and I still think that's a possibility. In fact, I could see they could beat anybody. They almost beat the Eagles, they almost beat the Dolphins. So I don't see them as a playoff team, but I see them as a competitive one that nobody's going to enjoy playing against. And especially even at the end of the season, once they're maybe out of the picture and playing a team maybe that's trying to make the playoffs, that might not be a fun experience for the team trying to get in, because I think, no matter who the Patriots are playing against, with that defense, they have a chance against anybody. And I think they're going to lose a lot of close games. They're going to be one of those teams that maybe have some hard luck, and, just like they did the last couple of weeks here. I think they're going to lose quite a few more games like that, games that they're in, games that they have a chance to win, but just come up a little short. But again, I would not be surprised at all if they won, 8, 9 games.
Especially because Mac Jones, I think, is a good. He's obviously not a franchise quarterback yet, but he's a
Right.
very good game manager and knows how to take control of the offense and be a leader for the Patriots.
Yeah.
So
Now, what are your thoughts on them, on the Patriots?
I think when you still have Belichick as your coach, I do give him a lot of credit for trying to make it work without Brady, and he's definitely getting the most out of his teams with what he's got, and he always tailors his offense to do what the players do best and help the players through their strengths and everything. Whether it's like going no huddle to get back into the games like they did against the Dolphins, or running those dink and dunk plays like they did with Brady to Mike Gesicki, or just running the ball to get key yards and move the chains on the first down, and just playing old school Belichick, ball control offense, where you just run the ball down people's throats and kill clock, time of possession.
Right. No, I agree.
And his defense is he was a defensive guy, and he's another guy where he likes to throw a lot of different looks at you to confuse the offense. It's kind of like how McDermott does with the Bills. So that's going to be interesting when the Bills play the Patriots, and McDermott has to scheme for the Patriots offense, and then you have to watch Belichick and his defensive coordinator. It's not Matt. I don't think it's Matt Patricia, but whoever it is, you're gonna have to watch him scheme against Ken Dorsey's offense. So that'll be interesting to watch on TV. So good story there.
Agree.
But anyway, we're going to be moving on now to the Denver Broncos. This team has kind of been snake bit the past 2 weeks, even with Sean Payton as a first-year coach. They lost a close game in week 1 to the Raiders 17-16, and they blew a 21-3 lead to the Commanders on Sunday, and ended up losing 35-33 on a failed 2-point conversion that a lot of people thought, a lot of the Broncos fans thought there should have been a flag there for pass interference at the end. But despite that, what do you think of the Broncos being 0-2? Do you think Sean Payton figures it out with Russell Wilson, or do you think this is a year where he realizes that this is my last year, or this is Russell Wilson's last year, and then I might get another year with a rookie and see how I do with if they draft a rookie next year?
Right. I'm not sold on the Broncos. I mean, I do believe they're in a much better situation than they were last year. And I think they'll win more games than they did last year. And I didn't see them as a playoff team before, and I certainly don't now. They could easily be 2-0 though, right now. And you may argue that they should be, but I think Russell Wilson is we're never going to see the Russell Wilson that we saw with Seattle. He'll again, you'll see improvement with him. I guess the question is what you're saying. Will the improvement be significant enough, or do you go in a different direction? And even if we do see significant improvement with Russell Wilson, what does the franchise decide to do? And
I think I think knowing Sean Payton, though, and being a former head coach for Drew Brees, he's probably going to want to, draft his own rookie to develop, and hopefully
Right.
he turns into the next Drew Brees there in Denver. Because I think he's going to be a good coach for the team. I don't
Mhm.
think it's his fault. He came in knowing that it was a make or break year for Russell Wilson, but I think he's going to want to draft a rookie next year to try to prove that he can do well with Denver and have a younger quarterback as a potential franchise guy to build around.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think and I think nothing against Russell Wilson because again, I think he'll have the Broncos competitive this year, but I think the best move for the organization will probably be move on and draft somebody young that they can develop.
Right. I last year I think they were 4-13. I want to say, if I'm
Mhm.
correct, and
I believe so.
this year I think they're going to be. I got them 5-12 or 6-11. What are your thoughts around? Would you
Yeah,
say
I had
five
them
and
even
12, six
winning
and
more.
11?
I had them winning like maybe 7 or 8 games, and I still think they're capable of doing that. I could see them going maybe 7-10. That's what I would see. An improvement from last year. Um, I guess time will tell, but
Mhm.
still a ways to go to develop. They'll be competitive and they'll beat some teams, but I think this kind of proves that they're still not ready for prime time.
Right, and like I said, I still like the Sean Payton hire. I think he's still a good coach for them.
I do too. I agree with that as well.
And what's going on right now is it's not his fault in his first year. If anybody wants to start saying fire Sean Payton after 1 year, don't be like that, because
Yeah.
he kind of got a really raw deal taking this job in his first year, I
His
think.
job is to clean up the mess that was created before, and I think he'll do that.
I do too. Uh anyway, let's move on to the Chicago Bears. And now this is the biggest mystery or the biggest surprise of the NFL and the NFC in terms of the Bears Nation. The Bears Nation was hyping up Justin Fields, and Justin Fields says he was going to throw for 4,000 yards and be the first Bears quarterback to do that and everything. And it hasn't worked out so far, and he's 0-2. And I have Justin Fields on my fantasy team. So,
Me too.
and uh, how far do you think, or they could still go with Justin Fields at quarterback? Or do you think they could still at least win some games with him, or what do you feel like?
Yeah, I do. This is another team again, a weak division that they're going to beat some teams and they're going to win some big games. 4,000 yards I think is ridiculous. He's just never had that capability, and I feel like he never will. Again, would I want to have Justin Fields on my team? Probably yes, because he can still make things happen. And I think he's still learning, and I think he's still capable of learning. But he's never going to be that quarterback that, a great passing quarterback. He's a great running quarterback. Look, Lamar Jackson, something like that. Um, Again, he can get some wins for this team, and I think he will. Again, I don't see them making the playoffs at this point now, but I thought in the beginning of the season maybe they had a chance. Maybe get some close wins that they can win a weak division, but I don't see that happening at this point. However, again, I think they're going to take some strides, and upon saying that though, and again supporting Justin Fields a little bit, I almost feel like this is kind of a make or break year for him, and that if we don't see those strides, I think he got some questions at that point, and hey, he's still giving us some decent fantasy points, but is that's maybe some good enough to help us out, but how capable do you think he is of helping an NFL team?
I totally think he's still. I think he's very capable. The running aspect's good. You want that in a quarterback. Now, if he can
Hmm.
work on his passing, I think you do have a star here. And I think he's a humble kid. He's a
Hmm.
hard worker. Good background, good good body of work at Ohio State. And
Mhm.
even last year, he was in a 3-14 year with a young team around him and a young offensive line and a young defense. I think there was learning curves, and they were obviously 3-14. But I still think they might finish last place in the division. But I got them winning 7 or 8 games. I got them going 7-10 or 8-9. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I could see that. I'd say more maybe the lower end, 7-10. But they're going to beat some teams. And again, that's one of those teams where maybe you're fighting to make the playoffs later on. I don't know if you're going to want to face them because they might be playing loose and be out of it. But certain playing competitively and maybe knocking some teams out of the playoffs.
If they don't make it this year, I think year 3, um, they could get in. I feel like because that
Hmm.
team is getting better under Eberflus. You can see it. He's starting to get his culture in. Um,
Yeah.
the he's starting to build a good defense there. Ryan Poles, I think, is a very good GM from Canandaigua. I think
Hmm.
they're they got a plan and they know what they want to do. They just got to keep going with it. And continuity is what's gonna win in this league, as it always has been for the last 2 decades, I would say.
I completely agree.
Mhm. And now turning to the Houston Texans, this is a this is an interesting team because they're 0-2. They're breaking in a rookie quarterback who was the highest drafted quarterback since David Carr. We all know how David Carr um, turned out. And CJ Stroud is the number 2 pick. He didn't really, you could say he really didn't help himself last week, but he was playing with 4 backup linemen last week, which didn't help. But
Right.
if you look at it, his numbers haven't been bad the first 2 weeks. And I think he's going to improve with each game. I think all the rookie quarterbacks are going to. Like Anthony Richardson, once he gets healthy, you can see he's improving.
Hmm.
Bryce Young improved last night, even in a losing effort. And I think CJ Stroud even did show some strides, even in a blowout loss to the Colts. So what do you think of the Texans? Because I think this is only the beginning of the build with CJ Stroud at quarterback, even though they might be 0-2 right away.
Yeah,
I think it's patience with this team. What do you think?
totally patience, and I think the goal for not only the Houston Texans, but all these teams with the young quarterbacks, just develop them, try to get some wins, you win as many games as you can, obviously, you know, none of these teams had Super Bowl aspirations. Just try to do better than you did last year. Houston's going to win more games than they won last year, and focus on being patient and focus on the development of your star quarterback and the rest of your team. Then you bring in some more guys that can protect him better. That's the only fear I have because it seems like all these young quarterbacks have very fragile offensive lines. And I think one of the big goals is somehow keeping them healthy because I'm afraid, and you've seen this, not just now, but, even think Joe Burrow a few years ago. You know, a lot of times these quarterbacks get hurt and they get injured simply because they get slaughtered because the offensive line is so fragile and guys are getting through and they're taking such big hits. So that's a prime concern too, is keeping these guys healthy. So again, Houston's going to have another difficult season, but I think it's a successful one if you see significant improvement by Stroud, by the rest of the team, and you win some more games than you had last year. You
I
know,
still love the hire of D'Amico Ryans. I think he's going to be a great coach for them. And I believe we said that they were going to be 8-9 or 9-8 at the beginning of the season, but that was before these 2 losses. What are your thoughts, Joe? Do you still want to say 8-9, 9-8 with the Texans?
no, because I think both of these, especially week 2. I don't know about week 1, but this game against the Colts at home, I think that's a very winnable game, and it seemed like they weren't even close. So no, I'm thinking maybe 6, maybe 5 or 6 games. I'm going with the Texans at this point.
Which is still an improvement from last year with a rookie quarterback, and then they can take their next steps going forward, which is good. So,
That's right.
and if the defense gets better at the end of the year with Will Richardson and everything, and they start playing a D'Amico Ryan style defense like they did with the 49ers, that's going to help too.
I
Gain
agree.
confidence. Um, Lastly, let's take a look at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, they may be a crummy team at this point of the season, and some people are saying that they're already on the tanking for Caleb Williams or Drake May train. But at least they've gave their opponents 60 minutes of play each week. But it looks kind of concerning that they still gave away the game against Washington at the end to lose 20-16, and then they blew the 20-0 lead against Daniel Jones and the Giants. So, what do you think of this team? Do you think their competitiveness will get them close to the Super Bowl, or do you think they might just lose a bunch of close games and end up drafting Caleb Williams as everybody expected?
Yeah, I mean, hey, I was happy to see what happened the other day. Again, besides the Bills, I'm a Giants fan. I was scratching my head. I was like, what in the world is going on with this team? I mean, you're outscored 60-0 in 6 quarters, and then all of a sudden come back and win the game. So kudos to the Giants for that. And now they're 1-1 right in the mix. But Arizona's a team that I was not optimistic about from the beginning, and I am not optimistic about now. Some of these other teams like Houston, like Chicago, we said, hey, they can win some games. They're going to beat some teams. I honestly don't feel that way about Arizona. I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of pessimism there. I mean, they're going to compete, of course, but I think they have more of an incentive almost to not compete. So I don't see great things. I don't see them competing like the Bears and like the Texans, like we just said, even like the Broncos or a team like that. I think, they might end up being, if not the worst team in the league, then one of them, so I'm not, I mean, do you agree with that? Or you think maybe they can win a few more games than people think?
I do agree they're going to be the worst team in the league. But like I said, it comes with a good consolation of getting Caleb Williams, the quarterback you need. I do like Jonathan Gannon as head coach. I think that was a good hire by Arizona, to come in and change the culture. And even though they're probably only going to be 3-14 or 4-13, he's already changing the culture with a lot of good young players on the roster, and they're only going to get younger next year by getting Caleb Williams and see what they do in their second draft. So
I wasn't familiar with him, but I watched a lot of that Giants game, an Arizona game the other day, and I was impressed with the way he handled the players. So I agree with what you're saying about Gannon. I think that's a good choice, and hopefully they give him some time to develop that team, because I like the way he interacted with the players there.
Like I said, some of these coaches now, they know with Gannon, it's going to be, he's obviously going more for his vision's long-term success, long-term rebuild over short-term success. Some of these coaches are realizing that, while other teams are still going for short-term success. That's the way
right.
the league kind of is now.
Yeah,
you're either going for short-term success or long-term building to get to success. That's how it is.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of situation you're in. If you got a chance to win the Super Bowl now, you're obviously short term. If that's not a possibility now, then of course you're trying to build to get there. So a lot of it depends on what situation your team is in.
Exactly. So we're going to move on to the Jets quarterback controversy, and a little disclaimer, guys. This is not meant to offend anybody here. We're just talking about what happened with Tyler Kaepernick and the Jets and everything. I just wanted to put that out there. This is not meant to offend anybody that likes Colin Kaepernick. I just wanted to say that. So to put that out there. Anyway, the team was reportedly sought out by Colin Kaepernick's agent, seeking his interest to come back to the league. knowing that he hasn't seen a play in the NFL since 2016 and is a bit of a controversial figure, do you think that he will earn another chance to play for the Jets? And we could be honest on this channel. I mean, that's the way it is.
Yeah, and I'm going to say the same thing you did. This is absolutely no, knock on him, but no, I don't think it would be a wise move for the Jets to bring somebody that hasn't played in how many years in a situation like that. I don't think it would be a good idea for them, and you know, within the situation they're in, and we'll talk about some of the other choices there in a second too. But um, no offense, and kudos to them for trying, but I don't think it would be a wise move at this point.
No, I don't think so either.
Mhm.
Let's move on to another topic. There are also other signal callers available that I'd like to get your opinion on if you think the Jets will good to see. Now let's start out with Philip Rivers.
Mhm.
Philip Rivers now, who recently played for the Colts in 2021, that lost to the Buffalo Bills in the wild card game in 2021 at Orchard Park, is actually now coaching his high school team. Do you honestly think that he would want to leave coaching his high school team to go be the backup quarterback of the Jets, where he could potentially, hurt his frail body at 35 years old and never do anything again? Or do you think he likes probably now coaching his high school team, knowing that he's healthy and he's got a job still in football, and he loves the game?
Yeah, knowing Philip Rivers and how valuable stuff, family and things outside of the NFL are, I would be shocked if he left what he was doing and came back, to be a band-aid for this situation, and again to risk potential injury. I think if he was smart, and if the Jets were smart, um, that would not be an option. But if you want the truth, I don't think it's an option that Rivers would even consider. And again, we could be wrong, and he could sign with them tomorrow. Who knows? But I would be shocked if he did. And then, what do you feel about that?
Like I said, I think he loves family, taking care of his family, wants to do what he wants to do to take care of his family and just take a job that he loves, which is still in football, which is coaching, even though he's
Hmm.
not playing anymore, and he can just make money and put food on the table for his kids now. He doesn't have to worry about the big contracts, the injuries, or anything being a NFL quarterback anymore.
Right.
So anyway, let's move on to Joe Flacco. And the reason why I brought up Joe Flacco is because he already was a backup for the Jets. And if they brought him back, at least he does know the offense and everything. And I think that would be the safest option to go, because he doesn't really have anything else, I think, to do.
Hmm.
He is a great guy. He was a Super Bowl winner with the Ravens, and you bring him back to help Zach Wilson, and he already knows the system. I think he's a perfect fit for the Jets again. What are your thoughts?
I think first of all, if he was offered the opportunity, he would jump on it. Unlike Rivers, where I even if he was offered, I don't think would take advantage of the opportunity. Flacco, I think the opposite. I think he would gladly take advantage of the opportunity. Now, I think you said something that I'm going to agree with. I think he would be more helpful off the field than he would be on the field, to be honest with you. Just the leadership qualities, the mentor kind of qualities. I don't think his play would be any better than what they're getting, from Wilson. But I think somebody like him, I think he would be very valuable for the off the field stuff. And plus, if something did happen to Zach Wilson, he'd be able to step in.
That is true. That's very true. But let's move on. How about Matty Ice, Matt Ryan? Matt Ryan is a guy that obviously we know had a great run with the Falcons. Um, Came close to winning the Super Bowl against the Patriots, but everybody knows about 28-3. Sorry, Matt Ryan, I had to bring that up because that's a cultural thing right now, 28-3. But yeah, I think this would be an interesting move because he's been in the game, he's done it. And I think he'd be a great mentor for Zach Wilson. And I think he's a guy that, like I said, he would know that offense too, and they wouldn't ask him to do much in it. What are your thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, now I've always been, a supporter of Matt Ryan. I think, for the longest time, I considered him one of the more underrated quarterbacks. I think last year was a disaster, though. Things didn't go well for him and his team, and I think that proved that it was time for him to move on. I'm not so sure that if he was offered, if he would even, consider coming back. But I don't think that would be as good of a move as maybe even bringing Flacco or somebody like that in. I think it's time for Matt Ryan to move on, and he had a great career. Nothing against Matt Ryan. Like I said, I've always supported him. Think that he's underrated and didn't get the attention and credit he deserved a lot of the time. But I think his time is done. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong about him being done, but that doesn't mean he could come back and maybe get a coaching job or something. But
Oh
right
yeah,
now,
no,
I think he's enjoying being at CBS as an analyst there, and he doesn't want to have to leave that unretire to gee, where have you heard that before? Unretiring to come back and play um another year. And to steal a quote from the Lay's Super Bowl or the Lay's commercial right now about Dan Marino and them saying let's unretire, to steal from the GOAT Tom Brady, unretire. Who would be dumb enough to do that? And
yeah.
obviously Matt Ryan knows he's not dumb enough to do that either.
Yeah, I think he should stay retired at this point.
Yeah, me too. Okay, how about Carson Wentz? This one's a wild card because he had that great MVP sophomore season. Then he tore his ACL, and Nick Foles won him the Super Bowl that year, obviously against the Patriots. Then he came back and was never the same quarterback after that. So, what do you think about bringing in a guy like him who was a former MVP, but like I said, hasn't doesn't really have that much to prove on a Jets team that has Zach Wilson?
Yeah, and I just again I like Carson Wentz as a person, and kind of felt bad that he was injured, but he really hasn't proven himself anywhere, and just I don't know. I every time a team picked him up, I'd be like, oh, what a great pickup. I think he can really make impacts with this team, and instead disappointed. So I don't see him making much of an impact, with the Jets if they were to pick him up. Again, nothing against him. I appreciate the guy and everything he's done in the NFL. Great personality, great person, but I just don't see him, really making much of a difference on this team.
Yeah, I do agree with that, especially the fact that he only had one good MVP season, was never the same quarterback after that. So let's
Right.
move on to Colt McCoy, or as I call him, the real McCoy. And
Yeah.
now I'm gonna probably be using some lyrics from some of their all-time songs. So let me ask you something, Joe. I like Colt McCoy. I think his biggest moment so far as a journeyman quarterback, even though he was a bust as a second round pick with the Browns, was going into Seattle and during COVID with nobody in the stands, beating the Seahawks that
Mhm.
year. So here comes my singing voices here. And this is a reference to some of the songs from the band The Real McCoy. Do you
Right.
think he should run away, run away and say goodbye? Or do you think he should just do it one more time? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to say this again. Nothing against Colt McCoy, but if I'm the Jets, that's not a direction I go. I think if you're Colt McCoy and you get a call from the Jets, you jump and you don't run away, you run to it. So
Mhm.
um, I think you're Colt McCoy and you get an opportunity like that, you take it. And I think he would. If you're the Jets, I think once we're done with these options, I'm going to give you one option that I think is the best one for the Jets, but I don't think it's Colt McCoy.
Okay. So, and lastly, what about Nick Foles? As I just mentioned, started a lot of games with the St. Louis Rams at the time in 2014. Then he went to the Eagles, got the start for the rest of the year after Carson Wentz um, tore his ACL, and he won Super Bowl 52 with the Eagles over the Patriots. And then after that, he went to the Colts. He didn't really do much there, but I think he's still in peak shape to be able to play. The guy's a winner, and I think he could really help Zach Wilson under his wings. And I think he could pair up with Russell Wilson and microchip his ear to help call some of the plays. Not Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, my bad. But I think you could partner those up and put a chip next to his ear and help Zach Wilson develop here. What do you think about Nick Foles as an option? Your thoughts?
Yeah, he's another high character guy, he's always going to be known as the guy that led the Eagles to the Super Bowl, when their other star quarterback went down. But again, he hasn't done much since then. And I don't have a lot of confidence in his ability to lead an offense. Again, I do have confidence in his ability to mentor a quarterback, but I'm just not 100% confident in his ability to lead a team, to be honest with you. And again, you may disagree because you think he's got something left.
I think he does, but in the NFL, it's a cutthroat, win now business, and it's also what have you done for me lately? And Nick Foles hasn't done pretty much anything lately since winning that Super Bowl. So yeah, I would, but I actually think he's the best option out of all this group. What are your thoughts? Who do you think's the best option out of all these names?
Let me tell you, and I heard this on the radio and I completely agreed with it. I think the Jets' best option is a guy out there named Zach Wilson. I think he knows the offense. Again, is he a great quarterback? Absolutely not. Is he coachable? I totally believe he is. And I think really, based on everything, based on finances, based on knowing the system, based on being there before, based on potential. I mean, do the Jets really want to pay to bring in a Band-Aid and, maybe, get to the playoffs? Again, Zach Wilson, is he a great quarterback? Absolutely not. But thinking about all the options out there, which I think the best options as far as possibilities are the ones that you brought up, and all have their benefits and advantages and disadvantages. But overall, I think the Jets' best option is Zach Wilson himself. And again, maybe get a guy like Flacco. I think if it's not Zach Wilson, I like Flacco as the best option, only because, again, knowing the system and knowing Wilson, being able to, step in if needed. But I don't know. Who do you think is the best option out of that group? I call me crazy, and a lot of people, I'm surprised we're not getting comments now, based on what I just said. But and I may turn out to look foolish by saying that, if he performs poorly. But what do you think is the best out of that bunch?
I actually have somebody that's not from that bunch.
Okay.
I got here's the smoke screen. This is the comment of the year type material here. So I actually think that the Jets should go with, get ready for this one, Green Bay Packers practice squad quarterback and former USFL MVP of this last year, Alex Magoo. What do you think of that?
I know you always hate these USFL guys, right? No, you're the biggest supporter of that league that I know. So I don't know enough about him, I guess, to be able to make that decision. I think it would be very difficult for somebody like that to step in to the Jets organization, and make immediate impacts. Again, that's one advantage Zach Wilson has as far as being a part of that system. But I like the idea, to be honest with you. Again, I don't know enough about that quarterback, but who knows? Maybe that's what they need to do, and bring in a guy like that nobody's heard of, that maybe could have the potential to turn some heads and say, "Oh my God, where did this guy come from?" Like I said, as much as again, I'm sticking to my idea and saying Wilson is the best possibility. I don't think it's that far fetched, to be honest with you, and I like the idea to have somebody like that come in.
You didn't see this quarterback play. I did, though. The
Mhm.
guy, they said the guy was the Patrick Mahomes or the Josh Allen of the USFL. Like, this guy was like running away from players, doing all these whirly bird things that Allen and Mahomes does. And he would just chuck the ball up like Mahomes and make these huge plays, or like Allen and everything. And he was a USFL MVP. He was a monster in the league. And the Jets could use somebody like that. And he kind of reminds me of a Zach Wilson, but he's older and more accurate than Zach Wilson.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And if you're a Jets fan, I mean, wouldn't you rather see somebody like that? That's going to make things exciting, and who knows? If this happens and and he succeeds, you're going to be like genius of the year with this. And now, I never thought about that, I'm going to be honest with you, but now you got my curiosity going. I would love to see something like that.
He needs a backup, and a lot of these I think the USFL, not to get off track, is actually it's going to help a lot of quarterbacks. I think that league's going to be built for quarterbacks, and it's also, like I said, the league's already built for quarterbacks in terms of like paying them all this money and everything. But that league is also going to help quarterbacks that didn't make it before earn a body of work and get a shot to eventually maybe play in a game, like PJ Walker did after he went to the XFL. He ended up playing for Carolina, and who knows, it could happen with Alex Magoo.
Yeah.
He could probably end up starting on some point.
Yeah, why not? I mean, maybe that's the best move of all, is something similar, either a player like him exactly, or a situation like that. But I guess we're going to see, and a lot depends on how Zach Wilson plays the next few games too. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, so now with moving on, speaking of Rodgers, Jets, Wilson, Alex Magoo, I live in a shoe. Let's move on. Now with Aaron Rodgers suffering a torn Achilles tendon Monday night, and it was everybody knows that was really deflating to watch. I mean, the beginning of the the beginning of the Monday night broadcast was crazy. I mean, Aaron Rodgers coming out with the American flag commemorating 9/11, the crowd going nuts. It was set up for that game, and when he got hurt 4 seconds in, it just sucked the life out of MetLife Stadium and everything. And even though the Jets won that game, it was talking about the season was over and everything. So anyway, he got hurt on artificial turf at MetLife Stadium. But here's the thing. They're all complaining about people getting hurt on artificial turf, and they want to go back to grass, like how the Bills' new stadium is going to be grass instead of turf. But J.K. Dobbins also ruptured his Achilles while playing on grass at M&T Bank Stadium. The NFLPA wants to change all stadiums back to natural grass instead of turf. But to me, I feel like this is just blaming the victim. This is blaming everybody else but the person who got hurt. And it doesn't matter if you're on grass or turf. I feel like injuries are going to happen. So, what are your thoughts on this, Joe?
I look at it from both sides. I think the artificial surfaces that they have now are a lot safer and a lot scientifically better than they were, years ago. I mean, you remember, playing on artificial turf on a cold day, some of those playoff games in Cincinnati or even in Buffalo, I mean, that was like playing on the street, and I think that artificial turf caused a lot more injuries. Now, just as a fan, I mean, I'm surprised this conversation is coming up now. I mean, this has always been a conversation, I think, and something that's been talked about. I'm one of those NFL, you know, old time fans, I guess, that wishes I've always had the desire that every single game be played on natural grass. And in the past, I did believe that the turf, the artificial turf, caused more injuries. And you have some surfaces that were questionable, even at MetLife Stadium. This is a new surface, but how many times did people have horrible injuries on the turf, 2 years ago, and Bosa and Barkley and people like that they were blaming the turf for those injuries, which I think they had legitimate concerns. You know, um, if I was a professional football player, college football player, I would still rather play on grass. So as a fan, I would rather see all games on grass, and I still, even though this surface, these artificial surfaces are much better than they've ever been. I still think grass is safer. I still think there's more potential for injury on the artificial turf. And then I was reading something, the players are upset because, and I think this is a very legitimate complaint. The World Cup of soccer is coming here in a couple of years, in 3 years. And all these stadiums for the World Cup are totally tearing out these artificial surfaces and putting grass in there. So they're concerned, the NFL players are saying, and I agree with this 1,000%. If you could do that for a soccer tournament that's going to be a month long, and for these international soccer players, why can't you do that for us? And I agree with them. And so again, if it was up to me, if I'm commissioner, every single field is a grass field. Again, to blame the artificial turf for some of these recent injuries, that might be a little questionable. And I think even the Rodgers injury, I think that would have happened anyway. But if it's me as a fan, I want to see the games on grass. And if I was a player, I think I would definitely want that as well.
Luckily, the Bills are ahead of the curve. Their new
Mhm.
stadium in 2026 is going to be grass. So
Right. Now,
that's a good thing.
what do you think about this whole thing?
See, here's my thing. I like the artificial turf
Mhm.
because look at what it did to a lot of high school stadiums. It made their being on an artificial turf high school stadium. It actually felt like you were at a pro event, because these
Mhm.
other grass fields were just these tiny little grass fields with the small bleachers and everything like that. But a big turf field, it's almost like you're at a regulation stadium with everything like that. So
Okay.
if all the NFL things went back to grass, what would they do for high school stadiums? Would they get rid of the turfs? Because high school, they like their artificial turfs. Like that's a staple in high school games. So
It is now. Yeah. So that's a good question. That's a good point to bring up. I think I'm just one of those old fashioned people. I think football was meant to be played on grass, whether you're an 8-year-old or whether you're, an NFL superstar. I think the game was meant to be played on grass, but I guess it remains to be seen what they're going to do about that.
the reason why I say this is because Thomas football was playing back in the day. They were playing on a grass field and it had no lights on it. So they couldn't
Hmm.
do Friday night lights games. And
Right.
Schrader could because it was a bigger field and they still had lights. So when
Okay.
they built the turf stadium at my school, Thomas, it was a big deal because we were finally allowed to play Friday night light games and things like that and join the party like every other high school. And
Right.
so I want what I think they could do is they could just put grass on the turf field that we have now and just keep
Mhm.
it a regular stadium like that instead of going back to playing on the old grass field we had before. But that's another conversation for um another day. So uh but it looks like we are now coming to the end of our show. Joe, where can we find you in the social media landscape in 2023?
2023 Joe Dell Sports. Still trying to get the page going. So, follow me there. As we get closer to these other sports besides football, I'll have some more information on there too. But, um, I'm on, this is on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. So Joe
Mhm.
Dell Sports, follow me there. And that's where you can find me.
Okay, and my channels are also growing too. So you can follow yours truly, Jamie Malloy, at Bill's Chat One, at Bill's Mafia Chat, and also at Jamie Malloy, the unbiased journalist, at DJ Dog Tags. Follow me on both of those accounts on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days. And also check out DefiantTakesFootball.com, where I write stories about the Bills, Syracuse football, and spring football. And I also write for fanbuzz.com about G5 football. And thank you very much for listening, folks. And remember, this was a bounce back week. The Bills were written off after week one against the Jets. They came back. Allen looked efficient. They played well. Offense didn't turn the ball over. Diggs was in the backfield. And also, remember, folks, what the great Chris Berman used to always say: no matter what happened in the 90s during the Super Bowl runs and even the 17-year playoff drought, one thing has remained constant. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. We'll see you next time, folks.
All right. Good night, everybody.